Hello, beautiful, soulful woman, and welcome to episode 9 of the Aligned Entrepreneur podcast. So this week we are doing something a little bit differently to previous weeks. In that I choose not to batch my episodes, I choose instead to really let myself be intuitively guided in my sharing and trusting that whatever comes through each week is going to be of deep service to you and my wider listening community. And this week has definitely proven that to be true. In that, yesterday I did a Facebook Live to my personal and business page, sharing some very real and vulnerable realities that I've come across in my personal life and exploring the deeper meanings of death, rebirth, and coming out of the spiritual closet. And the response that I've received in less than 24 hours has been quite overwhelming by so many women reaching out to me and just sharing their own burdens in this area, which has really shown me just how much we need to talk about this, how much we need to talk about the suppression of our intuitive gifts as women, our authentic expression, and how deep and real the fear is of being seen. And this goes so far beyond business. This is life, and this is the life and lived reality of so many women, and it is something that I am very deeply passionate about. So for this week's episode, I'm going to share with you that Facebook Live. And so because of not wanting to dilute the potency of that message, because that would completely defeat the purpose, I have decided to leave it completely unedited and uncut and untouched, which means that there's going to be a little bit of background noise because I recorded it rather than it being in my safe little bubble with my blankets and my heater in my office with all my plants and my cat, how I would usually record my episode. This Facebook Live was done in a park, which means that there are dogs barking and kids playing and just life happening all around me in that moment. So I invite you to bear with me for this week's episode and really feel into the message in its raw, undiluted form. And there's also a little bit of colourful language that is peppered throughout. So if your littlies are running around, I would definitely suggest you pop your headphones in for this week's episode. Welcome to the Aligned Entrepreneur podcast, the place to be for your weekly fix of divine feminine wisdom, empowered business mindset, and practical spirituality to help you break free from the hustle, find your flow, and grow your online business on your own terms, the feminine way. I'm your host, Blair Rhianna, and it is time to get aligned. Hello, Facebook land. I hope that you can hear me. I'm at a park, and in the past 5 minutes it's just been flooded with children and dogs, which is wonderful. So I've been sitting here for about half an hour trying to work out how to start this live, and I couldn't really find an answer, so I thought the best thing to do is probably to just start. And I can already feel that this is going to be a bit of an emotional one, so if that's not in your comfort zone, then that's completely fine. Feel free to not watch or to leave, that's completely fine. But and one of the reasons why this is going to be such a hard live is because usually whenever I come onto Facebook Live, it's always with the intention of sharing something that I believe will be of benefit to someone else. And so to do a live that's purely just for me, that's just because I want to share something for my own self and make a declaration for my own benefit, it's hard to say, let alone do. So this is kind of something that I'm doing for me. And hi everyone, I can see everyone's coming on. Hi Cez, hi Sarah, thank you for being here. So I'm just going to start because anything that I could think of to say is kind of in the middle, and I don't know where to create a beginning, so I'll just start. It's usually best to just start in the middle, or the end is usually the best place to start with everything anyway, and the rest fills itself out. But the past few weeks have been very difficult, very painful, very enlightening, and have had some very distinct threads, and the threads have just been kind of floating in the air, and I haven't been able to connect them until last night. They all came together and I got a very, very clear picture of what's been happening, why it's been happening, and the meaning and message that I'm needing to derive from it. And so at the beginning of this week, I went to a talk by Rebecca Campbell. Some of you may know her already. She is the author of Rise Sister Rise and Light is the New Black. And I went to her event very unexpectedly. It all just kind of weirdly happened that I didn't even know she was going to be in the city, but I ended up finding out, and at the last minute went to her event. And at one of the activities was you paired off with someone and you did a soul speaking activity thing where you would pair off with another person, and you would look into one another's eyes, and the other person would ask you, what does your soul yearn for? And your role was to just keep saying, my soul yearn for, and just keep going and keep going and keep going until you got to the answer. And when I did this, the very first thing that came up was, my soul yearns to grieve. And no one knows this apart from my partner, but last week my grandma died, and so I thought that would make sense. That's what it's referring to. My soul yearns to grieve, and my mind instantly said it's grieving the loss of my grandmother. But I knew, my heart knew that wasn't it. My heart knew that it was something else. And so when I sat with it and I couldn't quite work out what was it that my soul was grieving, and then the next question that came through was, if you were feeling courageous, what would you do? And the answer was, start again. And I was just like, that's scary. And so what ended up coming through was two very difficult things to sit with. And so then when I came home and I reflected on what ultimately it's been the past 6 months, I don't know about anyone else out there, but I've been in the depths of my own internal winter, and I have very much been in a bit of a cocoon and moving through, I think, what could probably be best described as the dark night of the soul. And having come out the other end of that, what I realised last night was that what my soul was yearning to grieve was the loss of itself and my disconnection from it. Because, and even with the title of this Facebook Live, being coming out of the spiritual closet, anyone that knows me well enough will probably laugh at that and be like, you were ever in a spiritual closet? Because all of my friends and dear ones know me as being quite spiritual, but they only really know a very small portion of that. Because when I was younger, I was definitely very much cracked open and still am in a lot of ways, very, very highly energetically sensitive, very intuitive, and it caused me a lot of pain, a lot of suffering, and a lot of trauma as a result of that, of just being so open and so susceptible to everything that was going on in my environment, seen and unseen, this world and other. And so after about 7 years ago, embarking on a bit of a journey to understand this side of myself and try to put an end to that suffering of being able to control my energy, master my energy, and essentially understand myself and to stop feeling like such a freak, essentially, which is the message that I'd received ever since I was young, was that I was too different, too sensitive, too spiritual, even though I didn't know what spirituality was. It was just by the very nature I was too gentle, too quiet, too sensitive, and I know a lot of women probably resonate with this as well, being told that we're too sensitive and too soft as children, and that we need to be toughened up, otherwise the world will eat us alive. Hi, Bonnie. And so 2 years ago, I made the decision to shut down my spirituality and stop walking the spiritual path. And apart from obviously meditating and continuing with my own self-care practices, I stopped walking down the path that I was going down at that time, which was doing my shamanic apprenticeship, very much involved in understanding my spirituality, very much activating my own potential, which has always been my greatest fear, is not that I'd be judged for my spirituality or my gifts, but that I wouldn't be able to control them, and that I wouldn't be safe in myself, and that this little human body wouldn't be able to contain it. And so, and this will all, I'm very much trying to get my head around all of this as I'm talking, so sorry if I'm not being very coherent or sequential, or even looking at you. I'm aware I'm not doing that either. So let me just do that. And so 2 years ago I made the decision to shut that down, and I thought that was a good thing, and I thought, great, I'll just do what I'm doing, I'll just do what I know is safe, I'll do what I know I'm good at. And I did, and I became very successful very quickly doing that. And if anyone's been following my business journey, they'll know that I got to, success, whatever the fuck that means, to be honest, in terms of other people's definition of success, quite quickly, just doing the do, and not using the full extent of my spiritual nature, but just very much getting in my head and just doing what's safe and playing small in terms of my spirituality, but appearing to play big in terms of what business is. And I realized that why my spirit was wanting to grieve, why my soul was wanting to grieve, was that when I went to visit my grandmother, so 2 weeks ago, I got the call that she'd had another stroke and she was entering palliative care. And so I got on a plane right away and flew to Melbourne from Perth. And at that point, her ability to speak had gone, so she couldn't talk. She knew who I was, but she couldn't talk to me. She couldn't talk to anyone. She could barely use her hands, so she couldn't write. There was no way to communicate with her at all. But she was aware, and so she was trapped in a body that couldn't communicate. So she couldn't express herself. And that's terrifying. If you've ever had a dream, I know that I certainly have, where you wake up, where you're in a dream and you can't speak, it's horrifying. And that was her reality for the week that it took for her to cross over. And so I flew over, and I wasn't and the thing is that working with spirit is something that I've been able to do since I was a child. And this is me coming out of the spiritual closet, is that being able to see spirits, communicate with spirits, work with energy and channel energy and move between the realms has been something that I've been able to do since I was a child, which, partly led to just being a very scared child. And I shut that down. And my mum, who in the past few years has seen me for what I'm able to do, and it's just such a beautiful thing to be truly seen by someone that you love. After, being in a family that didn't really understand my sensitivity, being in a world that didn't really understand my sensitivity, my mum, began to understand it. And she asked me when I was in the room with Grandma, she said, "Can you see anything? Can you feel anything?" And I couldn't, because I'd shut it down, which meant that I couldn't communicate with my grandma. In any capacity. And even when she passed, I couldn't feel her and I couldn't hear her. Even though I knew that she was trying to come through to me, I couldn't access her because I'd shut myself down. So I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to her because she passed when I'd come back to Perth. And why the grief needed to happen was because of my soul grieving its own disconnect from me, myself. And one of the most illuminating things about that experience of going to Melbourne to be with her was that I saw my auntie that I haven't seen since I was 7, and I just turned 29 a few weeks ago. And she told me that Grandma had psychic abilities, intuitive abilities, and I had no idea. I had never ever known that. No one had ever spoken about it. And I found out that my cousin, who I haven't seen since I was 7, works with energy and is and is also has access to spirit. And I didn't know any of that. So because this wasn't spoken about, I'd spent my entire life thinking I was different from every other person in my family. And I asked why I didn't know that, and it's because Grandma had shut that down. She'd had fear around her inability, and she decided when she was young that she was going to shut it down, and she completely locked that side of herself out. So it was never discussed. And then I found out that my grandma's grandma had similar abilities and had never spoken about it, never shared it, and they had all been in the spiritual closet. Not even the spiritual closet, because the spiritual closet means that you know that you have these abilities and you kind of secretly use them, but they just completely shut it down. And that's what I realized the grief was, because I realized that I had wittingly and consciously chosen to be part of a lineage of women who had suffocated their own soul gifts, who had held back their truth through fear of judgment, through fear of persecution. I realized that I was continuing a lineage of women as far back as, I have no idea how far back this goes, but I was continuing and embodying a lineage of women who were in a state of suffocation and a state of fear around their own potential and a state of hiding their true essence. And I'm at the stage in my life where I'm wanting to start a family, and one of the big things that I'm wanting to teach my daughters is to be empowered and understand themselves and to understand their own abilities, their strengths, and to be able to be truly who they are and express every part of themselves. But I can't do that if I'm not willing to do the same thing, if I'm willing to continue this lineage of suffocation, of hiding, of diluting our own potency as women. And so that was what the soul grief had been experiencing, and that is what has been my experience for the past 6 months of, it's so eerie. I don't know if you guys can hear this, but there's a dude in an ice cream truck, and it's just the creepiest friggin' thing. It's just, does anyone else get creeped out by that? It's just like the worst timing. And so this live, I don't know if anyone's gotten anything from this, but I know that I'm not the only woman in particular that has had the experience of having to dilute her own power, of having to hide herself, of having to hide her gifts. And that was shown to me very, very much at Rebecca Campbell's workshop, where I was in a room full of over 200 women, and 90% of them had abilities that they had never told anyone else about and were not sharing. They all had soul gifts that they were afraid to express and afraid to birth into the world. And I was just sitting there and I was just like, fuck that. Like, we are at a time in our history as women, we are at a time in our history on the planet where we are experiencing the most freedom, particularly here in the West, for the first time in our history, to express without the fear of persecution. But because we have a lineage of trauma around authenticity, we have a lineage of fear around expression, we have a lineage of suffocation, whether that's by a rope around your neck if you're a witch, or whether that's through suppression of just a society that doesn't understand you. It's a lineage, and 99.9% of women are carrying that, whether consciously or subconsciously. And so this declaration, this me coming out of the spiritual closet, and I don't know what this looks like yet. I don't know what this looks like for my business. I don't know what this looks like in general. And I don't know how much of that journey is going to be public. Because again, this is the first time that I've shared something on Facebook that I think is purely just mine. Everything else has always been because I want it to be of service to other people. So I hope this has been of service to you in some way. But this is me, I think, in some way coming out of the spiritual closet and making the commitment and the public declaration to understand and be responsible for the gifts that I've been given, and to use them in a way that is not just for my own healing, but to heal my lineage. Because every time a woman heals herself, every time we release a trauma, it ripples down our bloodlines. And we hold our bodies are the wisdom keepers of generations. And I'm not willing to bring a child into this world if I am holding on to fear in any way around my own expression. I don't want my daughters to have to go through what I went through, of feeling different and alone and misunderstood. I don't want to be on my deathbed with the women in my family gathered around, finding out things from one another for the very first time, when that could have been conversations that had been had for years, that could have been shared in circle, that could have been passed down, instead of being lost and going to our graves with us because we just didn't know how to share, we didn't know how to express, and we didn't have community and that sense of safety. So I hope this has been helpful to someone, to anyone. And I see a lot of comments coming through, so I'm just going to scroll back up. And okay, Sam, hi Sam. Shannon, so feeling this, yes. Says, me too, I am a closet hider. It's a big ass closet. But imagine what the world would be like if we all stepped out. Says, imagine what it would be like if we all stood up and said, this is me. And I truly believe that part of being an empowered, embodied woman is learning to fall in love with all the expressions of yourself. And that means the wild woman who can be a bitch, who can be spiteful, who can be... And the wise woman, that is a part of all of us. It's not just a role that we play, it is an embodied part of our feminine essence. And we can't fully step into our feminine power if we are only willing to show the sides of ourselves that we think people want to see, or the parts of ourselves that we deem safe to share, because we will never be safe. We will never fully experience a sense of safety within our own bodies if we are afraid to show all parts of ourselves. And I don't believe that we can fully step into an integrated whole being while we hide parts of ourselves in shadow, through shame, through fear, because that only leads to regret. And I'm not prepared to go to my own death or finish this incarnation knowing that I held back the key parts of myself. And that has been something I've been doing, and my body has suffered for the past 6 months. My soul has suffered. The only way that I can describe it is, for the past 6 months I've been in a state of soul anguish, and it's been far more painful than any pain I could experience from just being myself and having people judge me or reject me or put their own fears onto me. Suffocating and hiding yourself will always be more painful than the fear of sharing who you truly are. And I am just fully coming to understand that now. And so I know that part of my work in my next chapter of my business, because I've been wrapping up and closing a lot of doors and moving to different vibrations, and a lot has fallen away as a result of that. And I know that my next step is to most likely work in this area of helping women understand their spiritual essence, helping women come back to their soul and express their soul gifts and birth businesses from that place of transformation. I know that's my next step. I don't know what that looks like yet, but that's definitely what I'm moving to and being called to. So thank you for everyone who's been here on this live, and thank you for listening, and thank you for just being here and witnessing. And that's definitely been another huge lesson as well, is being able to ask for help and accept support. So the fact that you're here and I can see your love hearts is challenging that belief that I'm on my own, and that's been part of my chosen reality for the past few months, even though I know it's not true. So thank you for being here and helping me prove that wrong, and big love to you all. And I will see you all soon, hopefully. Bye. So thank you for sticking with me for this week's episode. And as you have heard, there is quite a lot going on for myself at the moment in terms of really expanding my bandwidth and really reopening and tapping further into my own authentic expression, and really looking at what is the legacy that I want to be leaving? What is my contribution to our feminine lineage? And so as I explore that more deeply, that may mean that the messaging and the content for this podcast may shift slightly, but I do want you to know how deep my commitment is to bringing you content and ideas and inspiration that I feel will serve you as you walk your path in not only business but also life, because the two reflect one another, as you have definitely seen in my own journey. And if this message has resonated with you, if you have listened to this week's episode and truly felt a resonance in the core of your being, then I would absolutely love to hear from you. So feel free to send me an email at blair@blairrhianna.com. Because if the response that I've received from this Facebook Live is anything to go by, the closet is a big one, and there are so many women holding back their soul gifts, choking back their authentic expression, and hiding from the truth of who they are. And that is something that I will no longer abide by. So I hope that you will continue to join me in this podcast as it unfurls and organically reshapes and expands and contracts to take whatever form it needs to be the vehicle for my authentic expression in this world and connecting with my soul sisters no matter where you are on the planet, because this is a journey that cannot and should not be walked alone. So until next week, thank you for joining me for this week's episode. I'm Blair Rhianna, and I cannot wait to see you shine your light in the way that only you can. Bye for now.